And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Memorial Day, Monday, May 26th, 2025. And we start with the state of the sea ice. The ice continues to melt off across the northern half of the Bering. Still a little ice there on the north side of St. Matthew, especially south of St. Lawrence Island. And we have some areas of ice up there around Stebbins, St. Michael, and the especially southern areas of Norton Sound. But again, this will continue to melt off as we slide into the month of June, even though temperature-wise we're expecting temperatures across much of the state to average below normal, the cooler side of normal. Not exceptionally cold, but certainly not warm. And there is going to be a little reinforcing shot of cooler air coming in off the Arctic Ocean that'll impact areas of the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, and along the Arctic coast as we go through the early week. But more important story is we have a series of low pressures and unsettled weather from the North Pacific up into the Gulf, and then we just have this lagging thermal trough of low pressure across the interior mainland into northwest Canada. That's the focus for afternoon, early evening scattered showers and thunderstorms. But more importantly for marine weather, we have this front nudging up against the panhandle here this Monday night into Tuesday morning, bringing additional rainfall and breezy conditions. And if that's not enough, we have like two other systems coming through, another one coming in on Tuesday night, Wednesday, and that will bring another slug of moderate to heavy rainfall across the panhandle for the midweek period, and yet another one coming up as we get into either later Wednesday or on Thursday into early Friday. So this just keeps on spinning. The big wheel just keeps turning and pulling moisture on up into the panhandle along areas of the Gulf Coast. And farther north along this Arctic front will push a little breezier conditions down through the Bering Strait along the west side of the state, especially by the time we get into Wednesday. So expect a little stronger winds here through the Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait as we go through the day Wednesday. But there's that low. We have just this general pinwheel circulation, and that front will bring another enhanced area of rain up into the panhandle for the midweek. Some of the rain could be locally heavy there across the southern and outer panhandle. So for Tuesday, here's the marine forecast as it shapes up. Lynn Canal, southeast winds 15 knots, 3-foot waves. Stevens Passage, Frederick Sound, southeast winds 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet. And as we get down here around Ketchikan and Metlakatla, toward Dixon Entrance is where you're going to have the bigger waves. 30-knot southeast winds, 15-foot waves for the outer coast. Southeast-south winds 20-25 knots off of Sitka and Craig, and waves running 10 feet. Those southeast winds turn easterly to 30 knots there at Cape Suckling with 10 to 11-foot waves. On Wednesday, another round of rain will be coming on in, and we expect southeast to south winds 25 knots here over the lower panhandle. Look for southeast winds 15 knots within Stevens Passage, Frederick Sound, and then north winds to 10 knots with waves running a foot or two there up at Lynn Canal. For the outer coast, you get outside across Sound, I could see southeast winds to 30 knots, turning easterly 25 knots outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling with 9 to 11-foot waves. For the northwestern Gulf, east winds 25 knots within Prince William Sound, waves 4 or 5 feet. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, easterly winds to 30 knots, becoming more northeasterly, increasing to 35-knot northeasterly gales just off of Kodiak Island, waves running 10 to 12 feet. Within Cook Inlet, winds will be northeast to north 15 to 20 knots, and waves running generally 3-4 feet. For Wednesday, winds will lighten. Look for southeast winds of 15 knots within Prince William Sound with waves 2 to 3 feet. Winds coming down from 30 to 20 knots from the southeast here outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, but things still a little agitated with waves running 12, 13 feet. Kind of a mixed bag of winds as we get down to Cook Inlet. Variable winds, Kamishak Bay outside of Homer at 10 knots, 3-4-foot waves. Becoming southwest to south 10 knots as we go up middle upper Cook Inlet with waves at best just a couple of feet. Now across Kodiak Island on Tuesday, look for north winds of 25 to 30 knots, 7-foot waves Shelikof Strait, 10-foot waves off of Kodiak and Akiak. As we go down along the Alaska Peninsula, winds are going to be more west-northwest, 15 to as high as 25 knots off of False Pass. And then on Wednesday, winds will come down further. West winds, Shelikof Strait, 15 knots. North winds, 20 knots on the east side of Kodiak Island. Northeast winds, 20 knots off of Chiknik. But as we go down along Bristol Bay, look for west to northwest winds, 10 to 15 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. The eastern Aleutians on Tuesday will see winds out of the northwest as high as 20-25 knots around Unalaska Dutch Harbor. Nikolsky falling off to 15-knot northwest winds. Variable winds around 10 knots, Atka through Adak, and then as we get west of Adak, southeast to east winds 15 to 20 knots, though they could be as high as 25 knots west of Kiska. And then on Wednesday, winds will generally be northwesterly, 15 to 20 knots across the eastern Aleutians, more northerly, Atka through Adak to Kiska, and then turning westerly, Kiska to Shemya at just 15 knots. Along the southwest coast, north winds out of Bristol Bay, 15 knots, northwest winds to 25 knots there within Etolan Strait and Kuskokwim Bay. And as we go up along the lower Yukon coast, look for north-northwest winds around 20 knots, and that would even extend up there north of Imanik. But variable winds at 10 knots, 3-foot waves out there at St. Matthew. For Wednesday, with that push of colder air coming through the Bering Strait, winds will increase to 20 knots from the north and that wider expanse of Norton Sound between Nome and Imanik, and down along the lower Yukon coast through the Etolan Strait. North winds 20 knots, same thing out toward St. Matthew. Northwest winds of 25 knots within Kuskokwim Bay. South winds, though, of 10 knots into Bristol Bay, and northwest winds 15 knots out along the Pribilofs. And then for the far north, through the Bering Strait on Tuesday, winds generally north-northwest 15 to 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet. Still some ice in areas of the Chukchi Sea, but waves running 3 feet. And as we go up along the northwest coast there, winds will be northwest to west from Point Lay Wainwright up to Utqiagvik at 10 to 15 knots, and continuing eastward there through Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik. On Wednesday, in the wake of that cold front, winds turn east-northeast, Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay at 15 knots, and then northerly winds will increase from Utqiagvik, especially as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea and get around the Lisburn Peninsula. Look for those north winds to increase to 25 knots across the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, including Wales and Port Clarence, as well as the north side of St. Lawrence Island. We're looking at northerly winds at 25 knots and waves running 4 to 5 feet on Wednesday.